Welcome everyone, it is my pleasure to welcome you to UN Women's first virtual celebration of International Youth Day, Youth Engagement for Global Action. We celebrate this day every year, but what does it mean for you this year in the midst of everything that we are going through? That is why we are saying enough. I am Generation Equality, my vision now, because young people are telling us enough is enough. Whom amongst you is impatient for change, for gender equality now? I am, and I'm sure that you are too.
Hi, I'm Faith, and I'm Faithfulness.
My name is Attila Yoldash.
This is Rajala.
My name is Katrina Leclerc.
Namaste.
Even though physical platforms and schools have been shut down and global events have been cancelled, our activism isn't put on hold.
I fight for gender education to be mainstreamed in Sierra Leone.
I fight for access to reproductive health rights of women in rural area of Nepal.
To facilitate equality and inclusion, we should make opportunities available for all youth from all corners of the earth.
We want to work, we want to build our future. Actually, I want to be human.
I fight for equality because every woman and every girl deserves to live in a violence-free world.
With coronavirus, there's a rise in almost all countries of domestic violence.
It's unacceptable that in 2020, young women and girls are fearing for their lives and for their safety.
If you believe in gender equality,
If you are a feminist,
Be the voices in your community.
Step up and give voice to those whose voice have not been heard.
When you break the silence and start fighting against injustice, you become stronger.
how to get started, just start.
Start from your surrounding.
Number 1, sharing information. Number 2, engaging online. Number 3, showing up to online movements.
I am Generation Equality because I believe in boys and men. I believe that boys and men want to be good and want to do good in society.
I am Generation Equality because I believe in the power of youth to achieve a more sustainable and equitable future for us all.
I'm Generation Equality.
I am Generation Equality.
I am Generation Equality. I'm Generation Equality.
I'm Generation Equality.
I'm Generation Equality.
Because we are young, we are restless, our voices matter, and we are committed to taking action that will cause this change. We are Generation Equality.
My name is Zozibini Tunzi and I will be your host today. This is a special day of global solidarity with activists, leaders, feminists from across the globe. And what better way to do this than through messages of hope, hearing from young people themselves and celebrating with you. Continue watching with us as we celebrate this day with performances from award-winning artists, dance performances, spoken word renditions, including discussions of some of the urgent issues that young people live and work on. What does International Youth Day mean for you? For me, it means recognizing the importance of the youth in society and realizing their influence when it comes to policies, governance, and even ideologies. Let us hear from other young leaders from the USA, Japan, and Kenya.
Hello everyone, my name is Ayana DePaz. I am a Grammy Award-winning recording engineer from the United States of America, based out of the state of New York. And today, I would like to share with you what International Day of Youth means to me. International Day of Youth is a day in which we honor and recognize the rising generation. It is a day that symbolizes the future, our future. I believe it is important that we not only inspire our youth, but it is also our responsibility to help cultivate their minds in a positive manner. Who we are and what we've become is a direct reflection of where we've been and the experiences that we lived through. And in our current social and economical climate, Many of us have survived dire hardships that have taken a monumental toll on us physically, mentally, and even spiritually. But in spite of these trials and tribulations, we stand here today, a living proof that we are stronger and more resilient than we have given ourselves credit for. So I implore you to continue keeping your head held high, to keep up the great work, and to also keep making strides towards a better tomorrow. The future belongs to you. Happy International Youth Day.
My name is Kathy Kayla. I'm 17 years old. I'm a student. International Youth Day is important to me because it promotes thinking of the youth as future of the country. It recognizes the role played by the youth in the society. It brings the issue affecting the youth. It raises awareness among the youth regarding the UN. It brings inspiration to other youths. As a youth, I would like the government to put strict policy to fight child marriages. I'm Generation Equality and my vision is now.
Hi, this is Satoko Yamaguchi from Japan. I am 28 years old and I am Generation Equality. International Youth Day is important because it's when we reiterate the significant roles that young activists take in their works both against pandemic and for gender equality. At the beginning of this pandemic, I felt helpless and hopeless. But through the global feminist networks that I have, being inspired, I started to organize a digital safe space where young women and girls shared their concerns without being judged, and they built a supportive sisterhood. Young feminists never stop their activism, no matter what. Speaking of national context, this year 2020, the fifth basic plan for gender equality of Japan will be established. Young feminists are mobilizing themselves quickly and making a youth statement as a part of the effort to include young people's perspectives into national plan. So here today, I demand more young women, girls, and marginalized sector of young people to be at the decision-making table. Enough. I am Generation Equality. My vision now.
My name is Maria Africana Katongale. I'm 17 years old from South Africa, and I'm Generation Equality. International Youth Day is important for me because I am an inheritor of an auspicious history, geography, innovation, resilience that is the African continent. I am a bearer of an astounding phenomena that is untapped yet rife in prosperity. I am a fortifier of a spiritually rounded and culturally diverse continent. And I am an incubator of an unprecedented youth dividend. The demand I ask for is transformational change in a white, classist, capitalist, hetero, cisgender, able system that has and continues to disenfranchise countless of groups and communities for the past 400 years. I call for action in the Palestine, Yemen, and Zimbabwe, amongst other crises. Enough. I am Generation Equality. My vision is now.
Celebrating International Youth Day is an important reminder that we matter and that our voices matter. Today, we are joined by Maia Reficco Viqueira, a globally known singer and a composer, as we celebrate youth engagement for global action, showing solidarity with all young people from around the world.
I am Generation Equality because I believe I am very fortunate to be a part of such an incredible generation that is all fighting towards fixing what we think is wrong with this world. We're fighting for equality, and we mean that in every sense of the word, whether it is gender equality, racial equality, homophobia, transphobia, we're all fighting towards that. So it makes me very, very happy to be a part of such an incredible group of young adults that we're all fighting towards the same thing. yeah, I hope you enjoy El Mar by Abel Pintos. He's one of my favorite artists here from Argentina, where my family's from. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Bye. Sabrás que aún cuento los días y como estés donde estés, estás en mi vida. Que soy cruel con mis errores, eso lo sabes muy bien me conoces, pero nunca sabrás lo que duele tu nombre. No pierdo la fe y te sigo esperando. Me siento así, como un niño perdido que no aprendió, no quiere jugar, soñar o llorar, ni sonreír sin ti. No soy quien soy si no te tengo. Creo en las manos de Dios y no en este absurdo dolor. Mirar el mar ya no me sirve, no me da la calma y vivo del último beso que guardo en el alma, pero nunca sabrás lo que duele tu nombre. No pierdo la fe y te sigo esperando. Y esta soledad que me sigue abrazando se queda en mí, no se quiere ir y no sé qué hacer ni qué decir. Amor, aquí sin ti no sé vivir.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Maia. Young people are some of the most to be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a difficult time for us as young people. However, the situation has also presented us with opportunities. We are standing in solidarity with each other to act together for change. I would like to welcome the Global Youth Task Force, who have supported UN Women in the commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women and its preparatory process towards the Generation Equality Forum in 2021. This is an amazing group of young leaders from all over the world. They are in solidarity with us as we say, enough. I am Generation Equality, my vision now.
Across the world, young people are often told that youth are the leaders of tomorrow.
But we, the youth, believe that we are the leaders of today and tomorrow.
International Youth Day celebrates the incredible contributions of youth across the globe.
With this year's theme being Youth Engagement for Global Action, youth across the globe stand collectively united as one with one vision.
And that vision is to change the world. So, here we are to show you our global action.
My name is Catherine Dibben, and I'm from the very east coast of Canada, and I'm changing the world by advocating for youth engagement and gender equality.
I am Juan Pablo from Argentina, and I am changing the world through my advocacy on sexual and reproductive rights.
I'm Pip from the UK, and I'm changing the world by creating safe spaces for LGBTQ+ youth.
I'm Zara from Australia, and I'm changing the world through my advocacy within international refugee and migrant policy.
My name is Anika, and I'm from Kenya. I am changing the world by advocating for intergenerational co-leadership for young people in governance structures globally.
I'm Ilayda from Turkey, and I'm changing the world by raising youth's voice against femicides and fighting against period poverty.
Happy
Happy
International
International
Youth
Youth
Day,
Day
from leaders of today and tomorrow.
Are you still with us and enjoying this celebration from wherever you are? We will now be joined by someone who is not only well known to us, but as an inspirational leader and staunch advocate of youth leadership. Let us all welcome Madame Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who is the Executive Director of UN Women.
Greetings, Generation Equality, and happy International Youth Day. I am joining you today to hopefully inspire you, be inspired by you, and together to map out what it means to be Generation Equality, realizing the rights of women. This year, we also celebrate the 25 years of the Beijing Declaration. We also celebrate 20 years of the Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. And hey, it is UN Women's 10th birthday. So UN Women is a young girl, 10 years old, but made up of people with many, many, many years of fighting for gender equality. So together, we make thousands of years. I am hoping that having generation equality brings together a core generational approach to fight gender equality, that it enables us to leverage your insights as young people who have a totally different experience. But also, you are holding the baton now. So your leadership is not for tomorrow, it's for today. It also is an opportunity for those of us who are older to hold the baton with you together so that we can share our experiences. Because of course, there's no substitute for time when it comes to experience. So there are things you may not have experienced, things that you may not have tried, but things that we have gone through and we can share with you while we learn the new things that you see in a completely different eye. We are encouraged by your radical impatience. It is most refreshing. We need you to be at the tables where decisions are being made, but we also need you to be in the streets where sometimes protesting is more effective. We need you to be on the podiums where you are able to speak to small and to big groups to communicate the message. It's going to take your work and your dedication, with us obviously being part of the effort to end child marriage in this generation, in this decade of action, which must make sure that 2030 looks different, but starting with generation equality, so that in 2025 we have results. It will also take you to work with us so that you are in the forefront of demanding that we fast track the passing of the laws in those countries where we still have discriminatory laws and implementation of the good laws. It's going to take you working together with us to make sure that we remove the barriers to women's effective and meaningful economic participation, the participation of women of color, of indigenous women, not as token, because diversity means that you are there, not just anywhere, but you are where it matters, where you are decision makers, where you can influence results. It's also going to take you working together with us to make sure that we close the digital divide within countries, between countries, as well as closing the digital gender gap which exists in most of the countries and may keep many girls out of school. With COVID-19, we have to make sure that we protect the gains. Girls must go back to school because girls' education was one of our biggest victories in the last 25 years. We also have to fight with everything we have against gender-based violence, and we have to fight and make sure that the men take the responsibility to end this fight, because women don't kill themselves, women don't rape themselves. Only when men are part of the solution and not bystanders will we see change in this world. So it is also going to be up to you and me to mobilize a new generation of male feminists, not to lead the feminist movement, but to make their contribution, not to be thanked for doing that, because as I always say, we don't thank fishes for swimming. They will be doing that because it is their responsibilities. You are Generation Equality, and we are together in this, and I am impatient to see your contributions in the action coalitions, making your contribution on the actions you want us to take in each and every action coalition, including in the combat for women, peace and security, and promoting girls' education. Thank you and Happy Youth Day.
Thank you, Madame Phumzile, for your leadership and inspiring message. We hear you.
We are Africans.
We are a people of untimed rhythm, jagged heartbeats, and the clucking undulations of the sun.
We are the dancing undulations of the sea.
The baffling but seductive pull of the tide.
The storm you feel brewing inside me.
The flash of the stars at night.
We are the celebration and the vibration of a loud leather drum.
The silent hum of a revel without the need of a warranted occasion.
Or the desire for the glint of daylight.
We are the inherited totems we venerate.
The culture of sacred mountains.
The rituals started in painted caves.
Prayers chanted in the chill of a midnight breeze.
To gods and mediums, spirits and bears of the rain up in the heavens.
To skin deep lineages,
bloodlines we can trace on the face of our soil-aged palms
back to places those who do not know will ever know.
Our unified heartbeats echo songs to the spirits of our living ancestors.
In melody, in rhyming unison,
in the harmony of the skies,
we ask these gods,
watch over and sanctify us.
We are the sharp taste of an imminent drought that will be watered by rain designed by the heavens themselves.
Rain designed to heal this beaten beige soil.
And nurture its yet to come, soon to be lush, thick-trunked, wide-hipped Goliath of a tree.
Emerging, rising out of that same soil, hallelujah!
We are the rooted tradition, imprinted in the stubborn, wired kinks of these warrior coils of hair.
Warrior coils of hair that have grown and have been matted.
dreaded and locked into that same soil.
We are children of the soil.
Irie.
We are that swollen with bounty, rich-bellied, gestational arc of a prolific womb whose sweet fruit bears the cultivation of coming generations.
Yes!
We are the women.
The men. The children.
Of the north,
south, east and west.
Of a continent that cradles the heart of the ocean.
As if the ocean would spill over and evaporate into nothingness without it.
We are a people of being, a people of color.
We are that rich, Sahara sun-blessed.
Killer Kenyan coffee. Soft Bantu Kalahari kind of smooth brown skin.
The flag of oppression, a stubborn sin of poverty.
Emblem of discrimination, stench of failing politics.
The color of the struggle? No, we are grit.
The same grit that conceived the confusion,
the chaos,
the mad mayhem, and fatal reality that is
vapor tongues, distorted habits, diluted cultures and doctrines,
mismatched values and outdated moralities.
Brothers, sisters, without a clue of who they are
or what their place of origin endures.
Brothers and sisters out in the great diaspora,
as if mistakenly that new place were a token of salvation.
A leaf of hope for a people that has it all wrong.
Brought by chance in the form of a white dove. Redemption?
We are an exodus. We are a plea to our coming descendants.
Do not forget.
Do not forget that you eternally belong to this land.
The way inhale belongs to exhale. The way we inhale what this land will exhale.
And what we exhale will be its inhale.
We are its oxygen.
We are a people of one focused moon.
One rising sun that
burns.
Only in Africa.
And for Africa alone.
We are the look of ageless flare.
We are Africans.
This year is a year when young people's demand for the seat at the table to determine their future has been loud and strong. They want accountability of those in power and leadership. Youth voices are strong and ready to make critical and lasting difference for gender equality. For us, status quo is not enough anymore. We want more and we demand action now. Today, we are at a crossroads where we are facing a global crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health emergency, but also a humanitarian one. The crisis is highlighting the fragility of our world, of the existing layers of ingrained inequalities that threaten to destroy our economies and societies. It poses an even greater risk to marginalized communities and those that are most vulnerable. Regardless of these challenges, young people around the world are at the forefront of change, leading mass mobilizations and social movements in the fight against global inequalities and human rights for all.
Black lives have always mattered. We have always been important. We have always meant something. We have always succeeded, regardless. And now is the time. I ain't waiting. I ain't waiting.
I can breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe.
I'm Israeli. I'm American. And my life matters. My black life matters.
welcome the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy of Youth, Jayathma Wickramanayake, in a fire chat conversation with young activists.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world right now. I hope that you are safe, that you are well, and that you are taking care of yourself and others around you. My name is Jayathma Wickramanayake, and I am the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And I'm joining you from New York, from the United Nations headquarters. And happy International Youth Day. It is a challenging time for all of us, but I'm glad that we can at least join each other virtually and celebrate this year's International Youth Day, of which the theme is Youth for Global Action. First, let me start by thanking UN Women for inviting me to moderate this panel. And as we are celebrating this very important International Youth Day today, I couldn't think of a better time to be discussing with some amazing activists who are here with me. Let me welcome Vanessa, Ines, and Samantha, who are joining me in this panel to talk to you not only about their work, but also the importance of the intersectionality of the work that they are doing as young women activists and leaders in their own right. So today with Vanessa, Ines, and Samantha, we are going to talk about mass mobilization, the intersectionality and the intergenerational aspect of their work, their movements, how they are using technology as a part of their activism, especially in challenging times like COVID-19, and ways in which young people can lead to a new normal in a transformed world. So I think none of us in this panel and none of those who are watching us want to go back to the old normal, because clearly that wasn't working for any of us. So we want to build this new normal, and we want young people, especially young women and girls, to take that leadership. These issues, of course, are important. I think even so now, as the world is in a crossroad facing one of the largest global crises, not only for our generation as young people, but this pandemic is affecting our entire world in a historical way, especially the socioeconomic impacts that people are facing, particularly the most marginalized and most vulnerable people are facing all over the world. It's been very clear that COVID-19 is not just a health emergency, but it is a humanitarian and development and rights emergency, one that has revealed the ingrained inequalities and injustices of societies around the world. This pandemic has ignited a sense of urgency to push for change, and young people around the world, like Ines, Vanessa, and the young people that Samantha is working with, are demanding equality, justice, and accountability from their governments. As we are undergoing this period of digital transformation, while that is not affecting everyone equally, and we're stepping into this new normal, young people are continuing to find innovative ways to mobilize technology in order to expand the shrinking civic space that we are seeing around the world. For these reasons, the panel today is gathered to discuss the global impact of COVID-19 pandemic on young people's fight against injustices and inequalities. To hear more about the activism our speakers are engaged in and the role of technology in mobilizing others to action. So let's get started. And before we get started, since we are all living in this pandemic through different challenges, I want to ask how our panelists are doing. I'm sure you've been very busy and still working amidst the very big challenges that you're facing. But Vanessa, how have you been doing?
Well, recently I've been feeling very tired because activism is a lot of work, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm a very happy person because of the amazing work that different young people are doing across the world.
Thank you, Vanessa. You said activism is tiring and it's a lot of work. So what exactly do you do? Tell our viewers a little bit about your work.
Well, I'm a climate activist from Uganda, and most of my work involves demanding for climate justice from the government leaders, not just my own government leaders, but the leaders in the international community. And this activism has involved doing protests and climate strikes every Friday. Unfortunately, we cannot do that now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So most of the strikes have been happening online. And I've also been working on some projects, like one of installation of solar energy and eco-friendly stoves in schools, because I don't want to just be an activist on the streets. I actually want to bring climate-related solutions in my community.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I think towards the next part of this panel discussion, we'll hear more about your work, the challenges and opportunities that you're facing. Ines, let me come to you. How have you been doing and how are you feeling?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm currently in Paris, so it's quite hot. So some days it's been good to be home and just have a fan on. Today was nice and cool, so I've been enjoying the day today.
Thank you, Ines. So you're from Peru, but you said you are now in Paris. Tell us a little bit about your work. What are you doing in Paris? What do you do in Peru?
Yeah, so I am Peruvian, but it's been 6 years since I've been abroad. I came to France because I had a scholarship to study, which I actually just finished, and I'm just finishing my master's dissertation. So that's what I've been doing here. But otherwise, I do work in different organizations and associations, one of which I founded here in France called Ensemble pour Techo, and we help people in Latin America eradicating poverty. So this is an organization I joined in Peru when I was living there, and then when I came here, wanted to continue to support, and that's what we're doing from France. Otherwise, I do work mostly in themes related to plastic pollution, climate change, and overcoming poverty.
Thank you very much, Ines. And I know that when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, you also started an initiative to educate young people about the pandemic as well. So I'll come back to you to talk a little bit more about that work that you're doing. But let me go to Samantha. Samantha, how are you doing? I think it's been a really challenging time here in the United States as well, due to many reasons. How are you?
Yeah, I appreciate the question and I appreciate this platform. I'm doing okay, and I'm learning to be okay with just being okay. This is a bizarre time. It is both disheartening, but also inspiring to be directly impacted as a Black person, as a Black woman in the States, being impacted by COVID-19, being impacted by the uprising that's happening. But also being inspired by all of the amazing work that is being led by young people, not just in the States, but across the world. So definitely in a consistent state of gratitude as well.
I think that's true for most of us. That's one of the things that keeps all of us going. So when I saw your bio, Samantha, I learned about something very interesting that you are doing, the Black Swan Academy. And not just that, but you've been very active in empowering young people, particularly those who are from disadvantaged backgrounds and racial and ethnic minorities. Please tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So Black Swan Academy, we work with primarily Black youth, but also youth of color, and giving young people the tools and the opportunities needed to be change agents. I know as a former younger person, and absolutely believe that we will be free. We will live in a new, just and equitable world. And the way we are going to get there is by investing and believing in young people. And so we do that work locally, pushing change via direct actions on the streets, but also through pushing our elected officials to do the work that they're supposed to be doing to ensure that our communities have what they need to thrive.
Thank you very much, Samantha. So at the beginning of this session, I told you that we will be talking about the intersectionality and intergenerational nature of our work. So let me go back to Vanessa. And she mentioned earlier about the climate justice work that she's doing in Uganda and mobilizing young people, not only in the African continent, but around the world. Vanessa, I want to talk to you a little bit about the intersectionality between the climate justice and the racial justice movements. You have been very vocal about how sometimes these inequalities affect also your work as a climate justice activist. I remember this statement that you made about, for an example, some of the leading newspapers or media outlets cutting you off from certain pictures and kind of giving the spotlight to youth climate activists from developed countries or from the Western world. How has the sort of racism, if I may say so, in the climate justice movement or the climate change space has impacted your work, and how do you see that young people can be more educated but also can take action to make sure that these things don't happen again?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that question, because I personally believe that it is important to bring in the issue of racial justice in the fight for climate justice, because we cannot have climate justice without racial justice. I've been reading so much about environmental injustices, and I've come to realize that communities that are affected the most by air pollution because of coal power plants, because of dumping sites, most of these communities are of Black people, the communities of people of color. And then I've also got to understand that I come from a continent, Africa, which is the least emitter of carbons, but it is among the most affected by the climate crisis. So erasure of voices from these communities means denial of climate justice to these communities, because this has been happening for quite a very long time in the climate movement. We have seen Black people, young people of color demanding for action, demanding for justice, but they have always failed to get their voices out there because they never get the chance for their voices to be amplified. You know, because of how the climate movement has been presented, it is so Eurocentric. It has been, it's an idealized climate movement, and us having an idealized climate movement leaves out communities that are affected the most. We've seen the beginning of the climate crisis from the Industrial Revolution, how indigenous lands were taken away, how communities of people of color had their resources snatched away, and all that brought about the issues that we are having right now. And this is something that is continuing. So it makes me think that these things didn't end. They were actually sugar coated. You know, racism never ended. It was only sugar coated and made to look like it doesn't exist at all. So I personally being erased from that photo, to me it was an erasure of not only my voice, but also my story and the stories that I'm trying to put across. I have seen the people in my country being affected by the climate crisis, people having to struggle to get food to eat, to have access to water, people having to suffer with waterborne diseases because of rising levels of Lake Victoria that are submerging toilets and submerging all kind of that, and people have to live with that. I have seen more street children on the streets. So how can we have climate justice if the voices from these communities are being raised? Every activist has a story to tell, and every story has a solution to give, and every solution has a life to change. I don't understand what specifically happens in Europe. I don't understand what specifically happens in Asia. So I believe that an activist from Asia needs to be given that opportunity to speak up. An activist from Africa needs to be given that opportunity to speak up, because they clearly understand what is happening in their communities. So we can only have climate justice if it involves everyone, if it is global enough. There is no climate justice if there is no racial justice, because the communities that are affected the most are those that are so racially discriminated across the world. And for the young people against these issues, because I personally sat down and I thought a lot about what happened, and I realized that probably the Associated Press never thought that I would speak up against this, that I would just let it go. And I believe they were really surprised to see that I questioned what they had done. So I believe this is what the young people need to do. We need to continuously question any kind of injustice. As long as it feels wrong, we have to question it, and then they won't do it again. Because I know that at this point, no other media company can crop me out, because they'll know that I'll speak up against it and they'll get backlash. So the young people need to continuously speak up against these injustices. That is the only way that we'll have justice across different sectors of our lives.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for those very sort of enlightening thoughts that you shared with us. And I think all four of us in this panel, in some way or the other, would have experienced something similar to what you mentioned. And as women of color and women of minorities, I think unfortunately this has become sometimes the norm that we have to deal with. But I'm really proud to see young activists like you standing up and speaking up about these issues, so that at least we can change those norms for the generations who are coming after us. Thank you so much for your work, Vanessa. Ines, Vanessa talked about sometimes how also in mainstream media or popular media that the voices of people who are most impacted by issues are not heard, and sometimes how we get others to be voices for the voiceless, instead of actually bringing the voices of those who have a voice and have those lived experiences into the spotlight. So you are someone who actually used these same tools used for discrimination against discrimination. And you are somebody who is using media, who is using public outreach to communicate to young people online about these issues, educate young people about these issues, but also rally and mobilize young people around these issues, kind of confronting the same barriers and structures that are keeping us away from each other. What has your experience been, Ines, and how have you dealt with sort of discrimination, misinformation, and other barriers that women of color, particularly young women of color, are facing online?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, definitely. What you were both saying, we all communicate, right? Humanity was born communicating, and we can use that communication for good or we can use it for bad. And obviously, we should choose to use it for good. And I've learned that communications are really key so that we can compel an audience to act. If we don't communicate well what we're doing, then no one will know what we're doing. No one will be able to join. No one will have the right information. So I did do an undergrads in communications, but way before that, since we were born, everyone communicates. So I believe that it's something that we should all be doing, and that gives people an opportunity to understand and to act after that. And communication for me, especially in themes like the ones we're talking about today, goes through storytelling. And storytelling has become essential to mobilize people to act against climate change, poverty, or other essential issues. And storytelling someone else's story, but also storytelling our own, or giving people the opportunity to share their own stories. And I personally love to tell personal stories. I could tell you one right now of someone called Mariluz that I met in Latin America, in a shanty town in Peru. And she didn't go to the gym, but she walked 1,000 steps up to her home each day. And she hadn't traveled abroad, but she spoke 3 languages, including a native language in Peru. And she had little to live with in her day-to-day, but she was always smiling and welcoming people into her home. And this person I'm talking to you about, you may think she's old, but she was 4 years old when I met her. And she inspired me so much because we were building a home for her that weekend, and a 3x6 meter home. And it's a tiny home, and she was so grateful, and she was so strong, and she taught me so much. And I love telling stories of people instead of giving big numbers, because figures are good maybe to give a wow factor, and we can say, yeah, with, for example, Techo that we work with in Latin America, we work in 500 communities. But in 500 communities, there are so many stories to tell. And I think those personal stories are those that will compel people to act. So when I share those stories, I find that more people donate, more people resonate, more people want to help, and they can see the impact of the work they're doing or that we're doing in those communities individually to each person, instead of saying, oh, I helped a community that I don't even know the name of. Well, I helped this one person and I know that they're leading a better life because of that. So I think communications works because we want to connect as humanity. And if we share those stories, we can also share our stories and bring something to the table and use our platforms to share what we've lived through, because I'm sure we all have a lot to share. But as you said, we are vulnerable to misinformation. There are stories out there that aren't true and that can also hurt other people. Stories, especially now, about maybe communities going around, people were saying, for example, oh, China brought coronavirus, and then it brings hate to this country. And it's not all Chinese who were involved. No one didn't really do it because they wanted to bring a pandemic, right? So I think it's very important when we're online seeing this information to try and look for the source. If there is no source, then it's probably not the right information. And also, even if there is a source, is that source someone that we can trust? Is it a government agency? Is it the UN? Is it a research paper that has been written? And all those things that can show us that it is a source that we can trust, then we can share it. Otherwise, instead of sharing it, we can say, well, this isn't the right information, right? So we can share it with the people that have written it and say, have you checked your sources? And make sure that everyone learns through the process. So when something starts going viral, it's hard to keep track of where it came from. So trying to look for the original information and only sharing it if it's verified can help. And there are also centers that are in charge of that. There's the Center for Countering Digital Hate, for instance, and you can look up on their website and they have steps on what to do if information is incorrect. So I would say, to conclude, that communication can be very, very useful, and it is. And I encourage everyone to communicate about their efforts, other people's efforts, share stories. It's always great to read them and listen to them and hear them, but also make sure that what you're sharing is correct. And that way we will make sure that no one is hurt in the process.
Thank you very much, Ines. Samantha, when I was listening to Vanessa, and also I have seen when she spoke up about the injustices that she faced, a lot of young climate activists around the world actually stood behind Vanessa and was really supporting her in her, in her case, making her case. And Ines has spoken about how she was working with the 4-year-old that she met in Peru. I see this very sort of progressive trend of youth climate activists or youth activists in general working across continents, building solidarity. I see them working across generations, not just with those who are older to us, but also with those who are younger to us. Particularly, I see Gen Z activists working together with millennial activists, the climate activists working with the Black Lives Matter activists, and them working with the Me Too activists. And really, there's this thread of solidarity I'm seeing across these different movements. And I would love to hear from you if you are observing the same. And if so, how do you see these threads being even more strengthened? Because some of these issues we're talking about, from racism to colonialism to discrimination, these need a huge wave of mobilization in order to dismantle these structures. And how do you see that happening right now, especially in the United States and the context that you are working in?
Yeah, so I have absolutely seen it, and again, have been inspired by all of the activism that has been happening, led by Gen Z, with millennials supporting as well. And I think that it is necessary. The biggest tool, I believe, of white supremacy, of colonialism, is this attempt to silo people, to silo issues, and make us feel as if we're fighting against each other. And so what has been birthed at a larger scale in this moment seems to be this understanding of intersectionality, that racial justice is gender justice, it's immigrant justice, it's climate justice, it's housing justice, it's health justice, and so on and so forth. And unless we make that connection, then we're never going to get to the place of fully dismantling all of these systems that are interconnected. And so I believe that it is necessary. I'm absolutely observing it and have experienced it in the work that we're doing in the States, particularly in this moment around the movement for Black Lives. We have activists who are able to connect environmental injustice to police violence. to say that victims of police violence have also had, among some of them, have had high levels of lead exposure, right? That victims of police violence, especially when you're talking about women, are more likely to be mentally unstable. That victims of police violence tend to be young, are more likely to be queer or trans, are more likely to be housing unstable. And so you see all of these intersections play out even within the movement for Black lives that tends to be pretty focused on policing and the criminalization of Black people and Black bodies. And then when you add those levels of those layers of issues, when you add those layers of identity, to say that Black girls are impacted at higher rates of school policing, of sexual violence, when you start talking about all of those issues, it again allows us to create the solutions that meet the most marginalized among us. And when we do that, we know in practice, when you're centering the voices, the experiences, the stories of the most marginalized in our communities, then we all benefit, then we all are able to thrive. And so, yeah, absolutely observing it and believe it is absolutely necessary in order for us to get to where we're going.
Thank you, Samantha. So we are unfortunately coming to the end of our session because we only have 30 minutes and there's so much that I would like to talk to you about, but hope we can keep this conversation going, and also those who are watching us can join the conversation on the International Youth Day as well. To wrap it off, I want to ask all three of you one question, a short question, but very, I think, a deep question and a question that we all must be thinking about right now. And I would really appreciate if you could, if possible, give me short answers as well. As countries are now thinking of recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, I know a lot of countries are putting together recovery plans. They are thinking about rebuilding their economies. They're thinking about the systems and the gaps that we have seen so far, the gaps that were exposed to during this pandemic. What would a perfect new normal look like to you? Because we all know that what was the world before the pandemic was really not conducive for people of color, for people of living in poverty, for those who are being left behind, for people with disabilities, for people living in minority groups. How would a perfect new normal after the pandemic look like to you? And I'm saying this because I think this is a good opportunity for us to rethink and rebuild the systems that we need, and we've got that opportunity. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that. First, let me come to Vanessa.
Well, I think a perfect new normal is one that has nothing to do with what we had before, because we clearly understand that what we had was a mess and it only favored a small population of people on the planet. So I think a perfect new normal is a sustainable and equitable future for everyone, whereby everyone, regardless of where they come from, they have access to the necessities of life, like food, water, health facilities, shelter, among others. I think that would make a perfect normal if people have access to basic needs in an environment that is sustainable enough and equitable enough for everyone.
Thank you, Vanessa. And Ines, how about you?
Yeah, I loved Vanessa's answer and I couldn't agree more. I think the new normal has to be one of change. We can't just go back to what was before, because that wasn't working, as you said. And I think a lot of people are talking a lot right now and saying a lot and promising a lot, but I think the new normal has to be one of action and less of talking, but more of doing. And that involves giving people access to housing, giving people access to education, making sure that it's a world full of solidarity, which we've seen a lot during this pandemic, making people more conscious, where everyone has a space at the table, everyone has a voice, something to share, and that everyone is listened to and action is taken after everyone's listened to. And we have, for example, the SDGs, which are a great way to shape that, but I think we have a lot more to do and there's an urgency in that. So I think we need to act with that urgency that we know is there.
Thank you, Ines. Samantha, over to you.
I echo everything that has been said. I would add, for us in the States and with the work that we do with Black Swan Academy, this new world must divest and abolish carceral systems, our prisons, our jails, our police. In the States, we are spending over $100 billion a year to police and criminalize mostly Black and brown bodies. 80 billion to incarcerate majority Black people. And all of those funds is what is necessary for us to truly invest in the housing, the shelter, the food, the healthcare systems, and everything communities truly need for us to be able to keep ourselves safe. And so I do think COVID-19 has shed some light on that and allowed us to know that it is possible. And so, yeah, looking for divestments in policing and investments in our people.
I completely agree with all three of you. And I think the change that we are talking about, we want to see transformational change, right? We just don't want to see slow incremental progress anymore because we don't have time, especially when we think about the climate crisis. We simply don't have time to take slow steps. Gender equality, 200 years will take if we go at the current pace. So we don't have that time, and we need to see transformational change. And I believe to bring about the transformational change that the three of you spoke about, we really need to dismantle the systems of oppression, the systems that perpetrate racism, patriarchy, colonialism, and unfair globalization in our world. And the only way to do that, I think, is if people take power to their hands. And on this International Youth Day, I am calling on all young people who are watching us to do whatever you can do to make sure that you are a part of that change and that you are doing your part to contribute to that change. Either it is about joining youth movements, either it is about protesting, either it is about writing letters to your members of parliament or Congress. If you are living in a democracy, it is a privilege. So go out there and vote. Run for office when you come to the age of running for office. And please hold the feet of our leaders under fire. And this is the only way that we can all come together and bring that change that we are truly talking about. So thank you so much for watching us. Thank you, Ines, Vanessa, and Samantha for joining us. I really look forward to talking to the three of you once again. And until then, happy International Youth Day. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, Jayathma, and all the panelists for a thought-provoking discussion. We truly can create a new normal, a transformed world.
My name is Greg Keel, and thank you, Zozi, for the amazing moderation that you're doing. Last month, UN Women celebrated 10 years since its establishment. It so happens that this year, the theme for International Youth Day is Youth Engagement in Global Action. We are celebrating youth leadership, creativity, and commitment to stand against gender inequality. I commit to stand for gender equality. And I'm Generation Equality. What do you stand for? I have the pleasure of introducing Manizha, a well-renowned artist who's been using music as a language to showcase and discuss social problems. Blow us away, Manizha.
Hi everyone, my name is Manizha Sangin, and that's my musician Eugen. And we're here to make your day, night, or maybe morning sound beautiful. I am Generation Equality because I am who I am. Let's do this. Let's go. Oh Lord, how long will you love me? And all my mistakes, they show me the way, and it makes me stronger, stronger. And I wonder what I'll be. Oh yeah, I'm stronger, stronger. And I wonder what I'll be in the end. I will not not say sorry. I will not apologize. 'Cause I am who I am. I am who I am tonight. Tonight, I will not say sorry. I will not apologize. 'Cause I am who I am. I am who I am. I pray one day ain't no borders. Wherever I go, I feel like I'm home, and it makes me stronger, stronger. And I wonder where I'll be, where I'll be. Oh yeah, I'm stronger, stronger. I wonder where I'll be in the end. I will not say, I will not apologize. Yeah, I'm not gonna apologize. 'Cause I am who I am. I am who I am tonight. Tonight, I will not say sorry. I will not apologize. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 'Cause I am who I am. I am who I am tonight. Tonight, tonight, tonight. Yeah, I was losing my words 'cause I listened to strangers. Thought that I have no choice, that I couldn't change it. I'm not scared anymore, 'cause I found the answer when I'm singing this song. My mama is dancing это все, что останется после меня. Это все, что возьму я с собой, с собой, с собой. I will not apologize, 'cause I am who I am. I am who I am tonight. I will not say sorry. I will not apologize, yeah, 'cause I am who I am. I am who I am tonight. I am who I am. I am who I am tonight. Love yourself and be who you are. Thank you.
That was absolutely powerful. We now have a message from Aya Chebbi, an award-winning Pan-African feminist and the first African Union Special Envoy on Youth. This year, her office is running a campaign silencing the guns. She wants peace. Let's hear from her.
Hello, African youth and global youth, and happy International Youth Day. From the virtual AU Youth Consultation Series on COVID-19, we listened to young people expressing how COVID-19 pandemic revealed and exacerbated existing global inequalities. From digital divide to youth unemployment and gender-based violence and many other forms of injustice. This is our day to bring up front and central all these issues to the global community. This is the day where we remind our leaders of young people's potential, bold, radical voices, agency, activism, and impact. Today, we also hold our leaders accountable to the progressive policy, the Agenda 2063, and the Agenda 2030. I also call on all global leaders to institutionalize intergenerational co-leadership and dialogues that can stimulate solidarity, build trust and learning across all generations, and to silence the guns, because silencing the guns is also about silencing corruption, silencing climate crisis, silencing poverty, silencing youth unemployment, and silencing gender-based violence. Now, to my fellow young people in Africa and the diaspora and the world, find your power and use it. We have so many superpowers. Our demographic power, our digital power, our mobilization power, our voting power, our innovation power, and our youth-led accountability power. We are the most interconnected, better educated, the coolest and most resilient generation. So let's take that power and be the custodians of our own development. Let's take charge of our own future. As we celebrate today, let us elevate and amplify and support the most vulnerable and marginalized youth in our communities. And again, happy International Youth Day.
Thank you so much, Aya. We are behind you all the way. Let me welcome Yvonne H. Chow, who is doing amazing work with the Hip-Hop Dance Conservatory in New York. She will share with us a beautiful piece called Funk for Peace, a message that resonates so well with our International Youth theme this year. sharing with the world such creativity as a way to make our voices heard. Let us dance for peace, for truth, and for freedom. The world is home to 1.8 billion young people from the ages of 10 to 24, the largest generation of young people in its history. Of them, 408 million live in armed conflict settings. Young people, girls, women's grassroots organizations, and solidarity networks are working to ensure that they are meaningfully engaged in preventing conflicts and building peaceful and inclusive societies. Hajer Sharief, you are the co-founder of the Together We Build It, an intergenerational organization working to promote peace in Libya. To you all, the panelists, what would an equal and peaceful future free of gender-based violence look for us young people?
The title of our conversation today is I'm Generation Equality. We will be talking about gender equality, talking about intergenerational work. We'll also be talking about peace and security. And I'm very excited that Juanita and Malika are here with me today. They have extensive experience on the field in every single aspect of all the topics that I mentioned. And I think it will be very interesting to hear who they are, their views, and just to literally have a conversation about this field of work. Juanita, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Once again, my name is Juanita Ibanez. I was born and raised in Bucaramanga, Colombia. I am a political scientist from the University of Florida with a master's in Latin American and Caribbean Studies from Columbia University in the city of New York. I have more than 9 years of experience working for the advancement of women's rights, victims' rights, and human rights in Colombia specifically. I've served different mayors and governors of Colombia in topics specific of victims' reparations. I was one of the youngest persons to lead the Victims Collective Reparation Program in Colombia. And now I'm really happy to be able to have this conversation with you guys.
Thank you very much. Malika, what about you?
Hello, everyone. Good morning or afternoon to you all, wherever you are based in the world. Thank you, Hajer and Juanita and UN Women for organizing this important event in commemoration of International Youth Day. My name is Malika Ayer. I am a program officer at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, which is an organization dedicated to furthering the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agendas across the world. I am based in New York City, but I am from Michigan in the Midwest of the United States and also from Mumbai, India. That's my background, and I'm really happy and excited to be part of this conversation. At GNWP, I work primarily on our Asia-based women, peace, and security programs, and my focus has been on empowering young women and girls to meaningfully participate in peace processes, political decision-making, and preventing violent extremism.
Wow, that's amazing. As you said, Malika, today we're celebrating International Youth Day. We're also celebrating UN Women turning 10 years. How do you feel? How do you feel when knowing that UN Women is 10 years, and also the fact that, well, as young people, we have an international day for us? Juanita, do you want to tell us what you feel?
Of course. Well, I think the UN Women being 10 years old is an extremely important achievement for our work and for advancement internationally. I find it from Latin America that we still have so much work to do, and so many people and so many young girls to empower, that the road that we have left is still pretty bumpy. I celebrate the 10 years, but I mostly likely like to celebrate the 30 or 40 or 50 years more that we need of this fight.
If I could jump in here, I could not echo Juanita's words more. I think 2020 is a pivotal year for gender equality, with key anniversaries such as UN Women, but also the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the 20th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, the 5th anniversary of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, and the 75th anniversary of the UN itself. These are catalytic moments to move the implementation forward of key agendas related to gender equality and sustainable peace. And I see them as an opportunity for young peace builders, feminists, and women's rights activists from across different generations to mobilize for our collective vision for sustainable peace and gender equality.
Malika, you mentioned something very important, that 2020 clearly is a year that is filled with milestones and important anniversaries. Almost all the anniversaries that you mentioned are events and declarations, resolutions that happened on an international level, mainly through the United Nations. In your opinion, if for an example, a local activist working on the local ground or the national level, what would you say the key important element of being linked and being aware to what's happening on the international level? What is the link between the anniversaries you mentioned and between the work that is taking place on ground and on the field?
That is an excellent question, and perhaps the most important of them all. These anniversaries highlight the need to bridge the gap between rhetoric and global policymaking discussions and actual change on the ground. And they provide an opportunity to highlight the critical contributions of young women and their need in particular to be able to meaningfully participate in peace and security processes and political decision making at local, national, and global levels. So to me, it is important and essential for grassroots women and youth peace builders to have enabling conditions and an environment in which they have the capacities to be able to engage not only with the UN, but with their own national and local governments, and to use these important frameworks such as the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, or the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action as key advocacy tools in their fight for gender equality and sustainable peace on the ground. And for us in the global international policymaking community, it's essential for us to use these anniversaries to advocate for investing in locally developed, youth-led solutions and peace-building initiatives.
Juanita, do you find what's happening on an international level, whether for gender equality, peace building, and youth peace and security, for an example, do you find them relevant to you and your work?
Of course, Jayathma, it's extremely important to link the international movements and the international work with what we do at local level. When I had the opportunity to lead the Victims Collective Reparation Program, we were in charge of the collective reparation of more than 700 communities, organizations, groups that were victims of violence, that were highly impacted by the internal conflict. Within these organizations, more than 30 of them were just mainly led by females and were women's organizations. This is extremely important because it's because of the networks that we find internationally that we can empower also the networks that we have nationally and the local levels.
So clearly from what you said, Juanita and Malika, both of you emphasize the importance of what's happening on an international level and linking that to national and local level. So pretty much it's a cycle. But in your opinion, do you think that things needs to be done differently in any way? Perhaps if consider that you became the Secretary General of the United Nations, what are the 3 things that you will do to link between the international level and the national and local level?
Well, that is a big question because I think there are a million things that I would do. But perhaps I can start by framing my answer within the context of the global coronavirus pandemic, which has had a disproportionate impact on women, young women, and girls. And despite this disproportionate impact, grassroots women and youth peace builders have quickly mobilized as frontline responders to the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in conflict-affected communities, often bridging the gaps between government relief programs, international relief programs, and to meet the urgent needs of historically marginalized and vulnerable groups in their communities. Just to give an example, members of our Young Women Leaders for Peace program at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, who are based in the Philippines, provided humanitarian relief and aimed to mitigate the negative impacts of the pandemic on women and girls while continuing essential work for conflict prevention and resolution in Marawi City in the Philippines, providing relief goods packages to internally displaced mothers in shelters in a very conflict-affected community. Their feminist emergency response to the pandemic ensures that the urgent needs of internally displaced women and girls, including access to sexual health and reproductive hygiene products, continue to be met despite the restrictions and that a national government or international actors might face. And despite the undeniable contributions of women and youth peace builders during this pandemic in terms of emergency response, they continue to be marginalized and excluded in decision-making on emergency response to the pandemic and on humanitarian interventions more generally, despite the important role that they play. So one of my key interventions or actions would be to transform longstanding inequalities. It would be to invest in locally led, sustainable, gender-sensitive, youth-developed humanitarian action and initiatives to build sustainable peace and promote gender equality.
Thank you, Malika. Juanita, based on what Malika said, I mean, clearly that grassroots activists are working on ground and more or less are non-stoppable, regardless of whether it is a war zone, whether it is an ongoing conflict, or whether it is a pandemic. Women and young people are mobilizing on the ground, they are working, and they're responding to every single obstacle and threat that comes their way. If you are the Secretary General of the UN and you're calling for a meeting to discuss the way forward after to discuss how to deal with the pandemic, who will you invite? Which actors will you invite to the table?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think that in order to truly have a good response, we will need every part of the society involved. I would start, of course, by states and head of states, because we have to take into account that the responsibility of its citizens are the governors of each state. And then, of course, all the international organizations, but specifically, I would focus on local and state governments. I truly believe that if we empower and we permeate those scenarios where the local decisions are made, we will have a greater impact on the lives of women and children, specifically in developing countries. Unfortunately, in Latin America, and well, in many parts of the world, but I'll talk about Latin America, the pandemic hit harder, of course, on the unprivileged population, and specifically women that leave their households and now are even poorer than they were when this started. And the solutions are not in the hands only of the president or the Congress or etc. The solutions are on the hands of the local authorities, who are the ones in charge and who has the budget per se. Unfortunately, corruption is preventing this funding to actually go to the relief methods that the communities need in order to get out of this pandemic the best way it can. So for me, it would have to be a local and a state level approach in order to truly cope with the difficulties that women and girls are facing right now.
And do you think people who are not directly involved in the field and this work, do you think they will be interested to attend? If you call for such a meeting, do you think that, well, grassroots activists and different groups of women and young people will be interested to come and attend such meeting?
I think that when we're talking about the daily need of a woman and their family, yes. I think that everybody will be involved, because everyone, I know it shouldn't be this way, but everyone has a father, has a mother, a grandmother, a niece, a child, a girl, etc. And they will be able to sense the necessity that these families are having right now. I talk from the ground because this is what I know of. I know how difficult it is for internally displaced people right now, that on top of the fact that are displaced, they have to deal now with impoverished nuclear families, etc. So I know the necessity to go local. And yes, I do think that they will participate when they know that the need is for families and for women and their children.
So clearly when what's being done on an international level, but also national level, being communicated to grassroots activists and grassroots groups, that, you know, that the issues that we're discussing, we're not discussing the politics of it, and we're not discussing the technicalities of it, but first we need to discuss what it means to us as ordinary people, whether you are the head of state, or whether you are a local person, or whether you are an international worker, for an example. So it's also really about how we communicate what we do, right? And when it comes to working on gender equality or peace building, sometimes there is different definitions. It means different things to many people, depending on your experience, where you are, what's your background as well, and what's your interest. Malika, for you, what is gender equality?
Gender equality to me is inextricably linked to conflict prevention, sustainable peace, and women's empowerment. 25 years after the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, armed conflict continues to be a major obstacle to the fulfillment of women's rights and gender equality. It has been established that armed conflict increases the levels of sexual and gender-based violence, marginalization, and discrimination experienced by girls, young women, gender non-conforming persons, and women. And in addition, research has shown that higher levels of gender inequality in education, financial inclusion, and employment, as well as high levels of intimate partner violence, are significantly correlated with higher levels of violent conflict. So therefore, a gender equal world must also be peaceful. And to women, civil society, and young people, peace cannot be merely defined as an absence of war or armed conflict. We look for human security, development, good governance, and a harmonious community relying on nonviolent conflict resolution as the true essence of peace. A gender equal and peaceful world must protect every person's civil liberties and human rights, particularly their uninhibited access to education, healthcare, economic opportunities, technology, justice, and social protection systems, regardless of their gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual identity, caste, class, or immigration status. And building a gender equal and peaceful world, most importantly, requires the meaningful participation of women, young women, adolescent girls, and gender non-conforming people in these peace processes, political decision-making, countering violent extremism, and humanitarian action.
So really, regardless of who you are, what you do, what's your gender, your age, your background, religion, race, anything, pretty much gender equality is something that we all want. And regardless specifically of what's your gender. It will be also very interested for those who are watching us and following the conversation to tell us what is gender equality for you and what does a gender equal world mean for you. There is also another theme that is that is very, I would say, close to ordinary people in many countries around the world, which is peace and security. What is peace and security for you, Juanita, as a person, more or less?
Okay, let me. Peace and security for me as a person is being able to live in a country that guarantees that I have a life free of violence, and that nowadays is very difficult to actually have. Peace and security means that women, girls in the rural areas of the country are able to walk at night without being victims of sexual harassments or sexual violations just because of the fact that they're women and they're being used as weapons of war. For me, peace and security is talking about being able to in their rural area also to have a normal life without being recruited to one of the militias just because of the fact that you are poor and you haven't had the same education or possibilities than the rest of the society. For me, peace and security is having quality education and quality healthcare. I think I could go on and on, of course, but it is mostly having a life free of violence and being able to develop yourself fully in a context of peace. I wanted to ask you, what is it for you, peace and security?
Oh, well, you truly said it all. I've been with my organization, that Together We Build It organization in Libya. We work on promoting women peace and security and youth peace and security. And regardless of the titles and the field in itself, and sometimes how technical the work for it becomes, it really comes down to as you mentioned, the personal feeling of being secured, ensuring that there's no security risks in the simple things you do. If you drive to the grocery store, you don't have to think twice, but also taking into account, unfortunately, the path of some vulnerable groups that they fall into when it comes to joining armed groups. Because I deeply believe that at the end of the day, no one will join an armed group, no one will join a war, no one will go to the front lines unless they have to, or they think they have to. So the fact that they don't have other alternatives, I think that's the main thing that for me is really, I would say, sad to see that we continue to have, and it's a little bit disappointing, regardless of all the efforts that we women and young people do on the ground, and regardless of how much we mobilize, wars still continuing, armed conflicts still taking place. Whenever there's a conflict, instead of, let's come and sit together and discuss it, it's very unfortunate that we have to go the violent way. Malika, earlier you mentioned two important resolutions, Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and Resolution 2250. And you mentioned that it's been 20 years since 1325 was adopted and 5 years since 2250 was adopted. It's quite a long time. It's quite a long time, one would think, especially for us young people. What do you think has been missing? Why do we still see armed conflicts, and why does wars still occur?
Well, I think there are a lot of answers to that question, but perhaps I will focus on two. First, funding. I think while there has been some progress made in the implementation of these resolutions, there has not been, they remain severely unfunded, with women's organizations struggling to access sustainable funding sources, and even less goes to youth organizations based in conflict-affected communities doing critical work to build peace and promote gender equality. And then the second one is we at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders promote synergies and not silos within the implementation of these two agendas that are inextricably linked over concerns on the different and varied experiences that women and young women have and youth have in armed conflict, and the importance of promoting their meaningful participation in peace building. So we advocate for joint implementation, and we see it as a way to truly accelerate the progress made so far and to have tangible impact on the ground. We need to bridge those gaps in the implementation and with women, peace and security, youth peace and security, but also humanitarian action frameworks. And women and youth peace builders have to be at the forefront. This is truly the recipe to leading to more sustainable, inclusive, and gender-sensitive humanitarian aid and peace building, which will then address the root causes of conflict and crises, build community resilience, and prevent further outbreaks of conflict. And finally, I just wanted to say one last thing, that women and women's rights and youth organizations often are operating in a context of increasing opposition from right-wing, conservative, and misogynist groups, particularly in recent times. So another important priority in terms of accelerating implementation of these resolutions is to protect those women's rights activists and human rights defenders who are laying their lives down on the line and are out there on the front lines of conflict advocating for its resolution.
Thank you, Malika. Fatima, very glad that you joined us. Me, Malika, and Juanita had a very great conversation about several themes. We spoke about peace building, we spoke about gender equality, we also spoke about the role of the UN and the international community and what happens on that level, and it's relevant to the national and local level. We would very much like to hear from you. First of all, tell us about yourself.
Well, I apologize for joining you late. We had a serious network interruption here in Maiduguri. And my name is Fatima Askira. I am the founder and executive director for Borno Women Development Initiative. It's a national organization working here in Nigeria in the Northeast. Prioritizing the needs of women and girls, and especially working around protection, issues of sexual and gender-based violence, and working with young people around countering violent extremism and peace building in a nutshell.
Amazing. Earlier, we had the question of if you were the Secretary General of the United Nations, and you're going to have a meeting about discussing the response to the coronavirus pandemic and the way forward. As the Secretary General of the UN, who will you invite to?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen this coming, but this is interesting. But one component, one important area I would prioritize is actually speaking to young people and bringing a lot of adolescent young girls on the table, because what we've seen currently is a change in the system, is an overhaul of how our lives are being affected, and especially the increase in sexual and gender-based violence-related issues, violence against women and girls, and access to opportunity for those young women, not only women, but young people in general. So young people would be first priority, and the people I will talk to, and that I'm sure would guide on the kind of response and kind of support we are able to give to people of concern.
Maybe in the same line, I can ask you another question. If you were a permanent member at the Security Council, what would be the agenda you would be pushing for in terms of, especially when it comes to youth, peace, and security?
For me, I think most importantly is highlighting the efforts and support supporting the grassroots initiative, especially of the work that is not even seen or heard by many of us. But what we've seen is that these little pieces of effort and contributions have, in a great way, changed a lot of conflict dynamics and changed the perceptions of young people. In fact, even in most cases, young people are not now talking more of the negative, but the impact in terms of positivity, in terms of how to support each other, in terms of how to build collaboratives, how to bring each other closer to the issues and how to respond to them. So I can say one priority area is to understand in countries that are very fluid and now facing a lot of conflict situation, and ensure that our advocacies in terms of policy, in terms of implementation, captures that agenda and place it at the center of all the conversations, at the center of all implementations, at the center of all activities that are happening. So for me, it's actually ensuring that funding are going into the right channels and capturing the grassroots initiatives and contributions of young people, but then also ensuring that at state and country levels, young people are also being brought and bring forward to ensure that we are cross-fertilizing their own concerns, their own ideas, their own solutions to ensure that it's a harmonized response to everyone.
Thank you, Fatima. We're very sorry with the internet connection problems that you had. We would have loved that you joined us from the beginning, but there's most probably other opportunities where you can join the conversation and we can hear more about your work and your thoughts. We reached the end of our conversation, but perhaps before we go ahead, I would like to ask Juanita, Malika, and Fatima, tell us what would you recommend an action that young people can take anywhere around the world when it comes to advancing gender equality and peace and security? Juanita, would you like to start?
Well, yes. I would like to see more women, especially young women, taking decisions at local and state levels in Latin America specifically. I believe in the power of changing the establishment from within. Young women should permeate the local decision-making mechanisms in order to incorporate gender equality policies at the local levels, which will have a direct impact on women in need.
Malika?
I echo Juanita's message, and mine is similar to, no matter who you are and where you are based, invest and amplify existing efforts at the local level led by young women to build sustainable peace and gender equality in your communities. So whether you are in a community where there are refugee camps, and you can support in building community resilience and social cohesion between refugees and the host community, or whether you are in a community that suffers from racial inequality and police brutality, you can support ongoing peace-building initiatives and fundraise for them, draw attention to them, raise awareness about them on social media, and educate yourself so that you can also participate and be a contributing member to this long but very important fight for peace and gender equality.
Fatima?
Yes, for me, I would say we have seen women actually making a difference, especially when it comes to the generation equality context, in terms of the different ages and how we are trying to link and connect this bonding. So what I want to see happening is not just at women level, but at all levels, whereby we would have this generation equality challenge being channeled in all we are thinking around in the systems and the policies, and have everyone, leaving no one behind is very important. So what I want to see is a group of everyone working together towards achieving the sustainable development goals and ensuring that we are really doing the right thing for the next generation. So I am generation equality. I think I represent that very well, and I am working in that line to ensure I am passing the baton, just like I am being mentored currently at this level. Thank you very much.
Juanita, Malika, Fatima, thank you very much for joining me today in this conversation. It has been a pleasure to get to know you and get to know the amazing work you do. Thank you everyone for joining us as well. As Fatima said, I'm Generation Equality, and I can't wait to hear more from you, Juanita, Fatima, and Malika about the work that you're doing, and hopefully we'll get to catch up soon. Thank you.
Thank you for such an inspiring discussion. We need peace in this world. Now we have 3 young women who recently graduated from high school. Chemutai, Gail, and Osa have remarkable talent and are rising stars. I'm excited to introduce to you these amazing artists, Malkia the Band.
Yes, my African arms, they groove you. My African lips, them gon' kiss you. My African hips, get down for you. My African legs will run to you. Whether you come here to break dance, whether you come here to shake hands, you come here to make land, never with the richest motherland. Whether you come here to rock with G.O.O., be not to find food, everything they yo, ever with the richest motherland. Anywhere you go, London, USA, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Anywhere you go, New York, Chicago, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Biko eruya wayo, wayaka, karibu kiti, tapewa nini, eruya wayo, wayaka, karibu kiti, tapewa nini. It's my African heart, he will love you, My African arms, they gon' squeeze you. My African ear will listen to you. I will listen to my Kenya legs will run to you. Come on, Mekujaku break down. Umekujaku get down. Umekujaku take chance. Hakuna matata, Come on, Mekujaku lipala, Kubiga than CEO, Hapa ulipo, Kataki, you know. Anywhere you go, London, USA, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Anywhere you go, New York, Chicago, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Biko eruya wayo, wayaka, karibu kiti, pewa nini, eruya wayo, wayaka, karibu kiti, tapewa nini, Africa, Africa, yeah, Malkia. Hey, soldier come, soldier go. Your home, now your home, irreplaceable. Anywhere you go, London, USA, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Anywhere you go, New York, Chicago, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Biko eruya wayo, wayaka, karibu kiti, utapewa nini, nini weruya wayo, wayaka, karibu kiti, utapewa nini, nini. be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Anywhere you go, New York, Chicago, nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home.
Thank you, Chemudai, Gail, and Osa for the beautiful musical piece. We appreciate it so much. As Generation Equality, we have dreams. We want an equal future. We want a peaceful world. We have demands. Thank you so much for that call to action. We demand change. Enough. We are Generation Equality. Our vision is now. We are nearing the end of our celebration. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Maria Brodskaya, a music and virtual reality artist, composer, and producer.
Where do we go from now? What do we say out loud? Fire on fire, fire on fire. They wanna break it down, they wanna make you cry. Fire on fire, fire on fire. You don't even know me, but I can be your enemy. Just because they say, hold on, you put your hatred down. They wanna us divided, but I don't wanna fight. All we want is love. All we want is love. All I want is love. All I want is love. When do we see without eyes? When do we say the truth? A fire on fire, a fire on fire. When do we stand, we're tall. When do we say it all? We are the one, we are the all. We are the one, we are the all. I don't even know you, but I am here to hold you. I can feel your pain, put your fears away. I am here to say, we're the one, we're the all. We're the one, we're the all. We want is love. All we want is love. All we want is love. All we want is love. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. All we want is love. 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 Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
What a beautiful way to close today's celebration. Thank you so much, Marsha. And on behalf of UN Women, I want to thank our talent, the panelists, and all of those who have made this event possible. Thank you to everyone who tuned in onto the celebration, commenting and engaging with us as we celebrated International Youth Day. Youth leadership will not be silenced. Youth voices will not be silenced. We will build back better. We will build back differently. Thank you once again to everyone, and happy International Youth Day.